Greetings, YouTube. I had someone recently speak to me about paternalism or maternalism. About paternalism or maternalism that extends beyond the traditional time period where we would consider that to be appropriate. Now, I realize that you are always your parent's child. You will always be your parent's child. But there comes a certain point in most people's lives where those umbilical cords, where the responsibility of the parent is severed to a certain degree, and the person is then sent off, pushed out of the nest, as you will, to live their life on their own. And while we always will have contact, at least hopefully have a healthy contact with our parents, it doesn't always work out that way. And it can be for two different reasons. Sometimes because a child doesn't want to cut those bonds, and sometimes it's because a parent doesn't want to cut those bonds. An extreme case I heard of recently in Canada was where two parents, for some reason, were able to convince a court that their child was incapable of making decisions for themselves, even though they publicly admitted he had no cognitive limitations. So they just decided and somehow convinced a court in Nova Scotia that he was unable to make decisions for himself, and so they had him put away. They had him severed contact with the public, even though he had the wherewithal to contact a lawyer, contact the Minister of Justice, and petition for his case, which eventually a judge said, yeah, you can't just do this to somebody. The laws are archaic. You can't just throw someone away because you want to. That's an extreme case. But there have been many instances, and I'm sure that you've encountered them as well, where parents don't want to let go of their kids. Sometimes people will refer to them as helicopter parents, always hovering around, never allowing their child to acquire the bumps and thumps in life that you need to figure out how the world works around us. On the other side of the coin are kids that don't want to let go of their parents. They want to have mommy or daddy there always as a barrier between them and the world. And neither of those is a healthy dynamic. I don't think anybody out there is going to tell me it's a healthy dynamic. And I've seen it really hold people back on both regards. When it's parents that can't let go and when it's kids that can't let go. And it's distressing when it happens. I've seen parents use financial incentives to blackmail their kids, to control them, to do things like they're the person that provides all their children's data as far as their phone is concerned, even though their children are adults and have kids of their own. And so they can use this against them and say, well, if you don't cooperate, I'm going to cut off your phone. Because the person doesn't have a job or makes less than they would like, so can't have what they want. The parent is using this as a chip against them. And I've seen kids guilt their parents into doing things for them when they shouldn't. When their parents should have said, you've got to stand on your own. You've got to figure out how to do this. It doesn't mean abandonment. There has to be a healthy dynamic. There is a distance that we need from each other. A healthy distance. Not so far away that we can't reach out and get help when we need it. Not so close that we're smothered. And that healthy distance, whether it's a parent and a child, or partners, or friends, or coworkers, is different for everyone and every relationship. Now, for example, personal space issues. In America, Americans like 22 inches. I'm serious. They've done the studies. 22 inches chest to chest. That's how far Americans are comfortable with a person being next to them. Any closer than that, and they feel that you're too close. Whereas most Europeans are comfortable with 14 inches, which is why many Americans think Europeans are too close, because the distance that Europeans are comfortable with is closer to the distance that Americans are comfortable with. And that's a physical example of what I'm talking about. Of course, I'm discussing emotional and mental space as much as physical. So people need to find that sweet spot. And the way that I'm arriving at that sweet spot is through cognitive behavior therapy, through a good therapist. His name's Steven. He's done a really wonderful job of helping me learn the tools I need to figure things out. And I'm almost at the end of my therapy, and I know it. I can feel it. I can see it. And it's good to know that I'm arriving there. that I'm getting to the point where I can figure out all this crap on my own. It takes me a little while. It takes me a few weeks, maybe a month or so. Could be to figure out what a particular problem is. I've got one I'm working on that we're working on for months now. I still haven't figured it out, but I know something's clicking on in the back of my skull, and I just got to figure out what it is. I've learned to trust myself. I've learned to let myself figure out the process. I've gotten to the point where I can analyze what's going on, and at the same time take care of myself and make sure I'm taking care of my emotional needs at the same time. I'm not pushing myself so hard that I do additional anxiety or additional harm, create additional anxiety. And that's the same thing I'm talking about here. That distance between parent and child has to be achieved through communication. Now, there's a parenting model out there where you have a strict authoritarian with low tolerance, and then you have someone who's raising their children in a rigid fascist-like household where the kid has no freedom of their own. That's not healthy. Then you have low discipline and high tolerance, and that's when you have a kid, the classic wild child, and that's also not healthy. But when you have high tolerance and high discipline together, where the parent helps the child to understand that there's a structure in the world, but within that structure you have space to do what you want to do, and that's the best model. And that works for both raising children and for helping adults grapple with the world. And that's what I'm doing. I'm learning the structure I need to work in. I'm learning it at 51, but I'm still learning it. And within that structure, I have all the freedom I need to grow and move and figure things out. But Stephen's helped me understand that there is a structure, that I can understand the structure. The structure isn't a mystery. And that's the problem that a lot of people have when they're in any of their relationships, is that we don't see the structure because we're not good at communicating. We don't lay things out for ourselves and for others, and we don't understand ourselves and our others because we aren't raised in healthy ways. We aren't shown healthy dynamics. And I blame a lot of this on the patriarchy and toxic masculinity for men, and unfortunately the effect it has on women. And that has really crippled us and held us back. It hasn't allowed us to look at the world in a healthy way of having the kind of dynamic give and take and the spatial structures that we need to be healthy and happy. So there isn't really a point to this video so much as I wanted to start a conversation. I want people to really think about how we relate to our parents and how the parents relate to their children. Do they have that healthy structure of discipline, but the high tolerance that allows people to grow within it? Because that really, to my mind, is the best thing we can have. We understand the laws and the mores and the codes around us. We know how to live with them. We know how to change them. And we can work towards that goal. We can figure out which ones don't work for us and which ones do. And I would extend that all the way up through the process of democracy. Nothing isn't connected. Nothing. I had someone once talk to me about and say they hated politics, and I laughed and I said, everything's politics. And everything's relationships. The dynamic between you and me and our parents and our kids and our friends and our family and our lovers. And the healthier we are, better chance we have of having happy and fruitful relationships with all the people that we know.